My name is Margaret Hill. I am 70 years old, a widow of only 3 months, and I have spent my entire life building a home and a family with my late husband, Charles. Together, we worked day and night to secure everything we had, our house, our savings, our small investments, because we believed our only son, Daniel, would cherish the legacy we left behind. But on the night of my 70th birthday, when I waited for a phone call that never came, I realized just how wrong we had been. I sat in my quiet kitchen that evening, staring at the untouched cake I'd baked for myself. 70 years on this earth, and the only sound in my house was the ticking clock. Daniel didn't call. He didn't text. He didn't even send a card. I tried to convince myself he was busy, maybe grieving his father in his own way, but deep down, I knew he had moved on from me the way one forgets an old piece of furniture left in the corner. I blew out the candle alone, whispering a wish I never thought I'd make. God, give me strength to face whatever comes next. I had no idea that whatever comes next would come sooner than I expected, and with a sharp sting of betrayal. The next day, Daniel knocked on my door, not with flowers or apologies, but with a folder. His smile was tight, forced like a salesman closing a deal. "Mom," he said, avoiding my eyes, "this is just some paperwork the lawyer needs. You don't have to worry about anything. It's just a formality after Dad's passing." My hands trembled as I took the papers, skimming the lines of legal jargon I could barely understand. Then my heart sank. It was a document removing my name from the will and transferring full ownership of our home and assets to Daniel. My breath caught in my throat. He didn't even have the decency to hide it better. "Daniel," I asked, my voice barely a whisper, "do you know what you're asking me to do?" He placed a reassuring hand on mine, the same way he used to do when he was little and wanted candy from the store. "Mom, it's just paperwork. I'll take care of everything. You won't have to worry about bills or maintenance. You'll still live here. It's just simpler this way." He lied through his teeth, but I signed. My hand didn't shake, and my face didn't show the storm brewing inside me. He thought he won. He thought I was weak. But he didn't know I had spent my entire life paying attention to every detail, every document, every signature that ever crossed our hands. That night, I sat alone again, tears streaming down my face, but this time not from loneliness, this time from rage. I called my late husband's lawyer, a man named Gregory who had been with us for decades, and told him everything. He was silent for a long moment before saying, "Margaret, don't do anything rash. Let him believe he's in control. We'll use that to our advantage." That was the first time in weeks I felt a flicker of hope. For days, Daniel acted like the perfect son, checking in, making plans to renovate the house, and even hinting that I should consider moving into a retirement community so I could relax. But I stayed quiet. I cooked him his favorite meals when he visited, smiled when he spoke, and even thanked him for helping me with the paperwork. He never suspected I was gathering everything I needed, every bank statement, every document, every proof that Charles and I had secured a backup plan long before his greed surfaced. My late husband had been a cautious man, and he had taught me everything I needed to know about protecting what was ours. The day Daniel finally took the signed documents to the bank, I followed behind the scenes. Gregory had already set everything in motion. What Daniel didn't know was that my name had already been removed from the property, but not in the way he thought. Instead, I had transferred it all to a trust under my control, invisible to him, and the bank. They were fully aware of every move. When Daniel tried to access the accounts, his card was declined. When he tried to claim the house as his own, the bank informed him that the property was no longer in his name or mine. It belonged to the trust, and only I had the key. The look on his face when he stormed into my kitchen that evening was priceless. Anger mixed with confusion, his voice shaking as he yelled, "Mom, what did you do?" I didn't flinch. I simply sipped my tea and said, "I let you sign, Daniel. Now, let the bank speak for me." He froze, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes, Not for me, but for the power he thought he had and now realized he didn't. He slammed his fist on the table, demanding answers, but I only smiled. You see, son, you forgot my birthday, but I didn't forget who I am. And I didn't forget what your father taught me. He left that night furious, vowing to fix everything. What he didn't know was that every move he made from that moment on would only tighten the trap he had walked into with his own greed. He underestimated me. And when a mother has nothing left to lose, she becomes stronger than any enemy. What Daniel does next will shock you, and it's only the beginning. If you think this story is far from over, you're right. Stay with me, because what's coming next will leave you speechless. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe because you won't want to miss. The morning after Daniel stormed out of my house, I woke up to the sound of silence, but it wasn't the peaceful kind. It was the heavy silence that comes before a storm. My phone buzzed repeatedly with missed calls from unknown numbers and a few texts from Daniel. His words were short and furious. We need to talk.
Now.
I didn't reply. Instead, I brewed my coffee slowly, taking my time to savor each sip. For 70 years, I had been the one running after everyone, putting out fires and cleaning up messes. Not anymore. This time, I would let the fire burn. When I finally opened the door to check the mail, I found an envelope shoved under the mat. It was from Daniel. Inside was a letter scribbled in angry handwriting. Mom, I don't know what you think you're doing, but this isn't fair. Dad would have wanted me to take care of things. You're just being stubborn. Sign the documents properly this time, or there will be consequences. Consequences? My hands tightened around the paper, but I didn't cry. Instead, I laughed, a bitter, hollow laugh. My own son was threatening me, the woman who gave him life, who worked 2 jobs to put him through school, who stayed awake all night when he was sick. And now, he dared to call me stubborn for protecting what was rightfully mine? That laugh turned into determination. If he wanted a battle, he was going to get one, but it would be on my terms. Later that day, I met Gregory, my lawyer, at his office. He was a tall, sharp-eyed man who always spoke with calm authority. Margaret, he said, I've seen sons like yours. They think they're smart, but they forget mothers are smarter. You've done the right thing with the trust. Now, we just have to keep the paperwork airtight. I handed him a folder filled with every document Charles and I had prepared over the years. Deeds, account details, insurance policies, everything. Gregory reviewed them and smiled. This is perfect. Daniel can scream, threaten, and cry all he wants, but legally, he has no power here. I felt a wave of relief, but also a pang of sadness. I had dreamed of growing old surrounded by love, not lawyers. That evening, I sat by the fireplace holding a photo of Charles. You were right, love, I whispered. We prepared for this day. I just never thought it would be our son on the other side. The flames flickered, almost as if they were agreeing with me. But before I could sink into my thoughts, I heard the crunch of tires outside my house. Daniel. He didn't bother knocking this time. He barged in, his face red with anger. Mom, you've lost it. Do you realize what you've done? You've humiliated me in front of the bank. They laughed at me when I tried to access the accounts. I'm your son. How could you? I looked at him calmly and replied, How could you, Daniel? You came into my home after your father's funeral, asked me to sign away everything, and you didn't even say happy birthday. Do you think that's what a son does? His jaw tightened, and for a brief second, guilt flashed in his eyes. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. You don't understand, he snapped. This isn't about you. This is about making things easier. You're old, Mom. You should be resting, not dealing with money and houses. Let me handle it. I stood up slowly, my voice cold. You think because I'm 70, I'm blind? You're not trying to help me, Daniel. You're trying to help yourself. And you've already lost. He stormed out again, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. As his car roared away, I knew this wasn't the end. Daniel was desperate, and desperate people do reckless things. I had to stay 2 steps ahead. The next morning, the bank manager called me personally. Mrs. Hill, your son attempted to file a complaint against the trust, claiming you were coerced into signing the documents. Don't worry, We rejected his claim. But he's persistent. I thanked the manager, my heart pounding. Daniel was escalating. I could feel the tension growing, like the air before a lightning strike. What would he try next? Would he try to manipulate me again? Or would he stoop lower? That evening, I received a message from a number I didn't recognize. Enjoy your house while you can, old woman. It won't be yours for long. My blood ran cold. Was this Daniel? Or someone he hired? Fear crept in, but I pushed it aside. I wouldn't let him scare me. I had survived grief, loneliness, and a lifetime of hardships. I wasn't going to be broken by threats. Instead, I called Gregory again. It's time, I said. Time to show him what real consequences look like. Gregory chuckled. I was hoping you'd say that. The next day, I walked into the bank with my head held high. Every employee greeted me with respect. They knew who controlled the trust. I signed a few more papers, and with every stroke of my pen, I secured my future even tighter. Daniel was playing checkers while I was playing chess. When I got home, I found Daniel sitting on my porch, his eyes dark with anger. Mom, he said, his voice low and dangerous, you're going to regret this. I looked him straight in the eye and replied, No, Daniel, you are. What happened next that night changed everything, because I discovered something that would turn this battle into a war I was destined to win. The night Daniel threatened me on my own porch, I barely slept. The wind howled against the windows, carrying with it the chill of something darker than winter. I stayed up, sitting in my armchair, staring at the shadows dancing on the walls. Somewhere between the ticking of the clock and the silence of my empty house, I remembered the safe deposit box Charles had insisted we keep at the bank. He had told me once, years ago, if anything ever goes wrong, Margaret, everything you need to protect yourself is in that box. At the time, I thought he was being overly cautious. Now I knew better. The next morning, I went to the bank and asked to access the safe deposit box. When the clerk opened it for me, I felt a lump in my throat. Inside were documents, dozens of them, detailing every investment Charles and I had made, including one I never knew about, a private account overseas with enough money to secure my life 10 times over. My hands trembled as I read the numbers. Tears blurred my vision, not from sadness, but from the realization that my husband had prepared for this exact betrayal. He must have known Daniel's heart was changing long before I did. As I left the bank, clutching the envelope tightly, I called Gregory. We need to move everything, I told him. All assets must be shifted into the overseas account, under the trust. Daniel can't know this exists. Gregory's voice was calm, steady. Already ahead of you, Margaret. By the time he tries anything else, he'll be chasing shadows. When I returned home, there was an envelope wedged into my doorframe. It wasn't from Daniel this time, it was from the county tax office. Inside was a notice that someone had filed to change the mailing address for my property taxes to an address that wasn't mine. My heart sank. Daniel was trying to reroute the property documents to himself. This wasn't just greed anymore. It was war. That night, I heard footsteps outside my house. At first, I thought it was the wind again, but then the porch light flickered on, revealing a figure lurking near my car. I grabbed the phone and dialed the police, but by the time they arrived, the figure was gone. The officer who responded shook his head. You should consider installing cameras, ma'am. Someone's watching you. I installed cameras the very next morning. I also changed the locks and reinforced every door. My house became a fortress. But while I was securing my home, Daniel was plotting something worse. 2 days later, I received a call from a real estate agent. Mrs. Hill, I'm just confirming the listing for your property is correct. I froze. Listing? What listing? The agent hesitated. Your son came in yesterday with paperwork saying he has full ownership of the house. He's trying to sell it. My knees nearly gave out. Selling the house? The very house Charles built with his hands? The place where I raised Daniel? My chest tightened, but then anger burned away the fear. Cancel that listing, I said through gritted teeth. He doesn't own this house. The agent apologized and promised to pull it immediately, but the message was clear. Daniel wasn't going to stop. That evening, Daniel showed up again, this time smug, like a predator circling its prey. "Mom," he said, smiling coldly, "I tried to do this the easy way. But if you won't cooperate, don't blame me for what happens next." I stepped closer to him, my voice steady. "And don't blame me, Daniel, for what happens when you underestimate me." His smile faltered. He left, slamming the door behind him, but I could tell he was shaken by my calmness. After he left, I opened the documents from the safe deposit box again. That's when I found something I hadn't noticed before, a handwritten letter from Charles. My hands shook as I unfolded it. "My dearest Margaret, if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer there to protect you. But I know you can protect yourself. Trust no one, not even those who share our blood, because greed can rot even the purest heart. Use what I've left you wisely, and remember, the power isn't in the papers, it's in the name on them. Keep yours strong. I love you always." Tears streamed down my face, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of resolve. Charles had trusted me to finish what we started, and I would not fail him. The next day, I went to Gregory with the letter and the overseas account details. He smiled knowingly. "Margaret, with this, you have leverage that could crush Daniel in a single stroke. But we'll wait. Let him dig himself deeper. When he's at his most arrogant, that's when we'll strike." And strike we did. Within a week, Gregory had filed papers that not only protected the house under the trust, but also froze any unauthorized attempts to sell or transfer it. The bank backed us fully. Daniel's schemes were collapsing one by one. But then, something unexpected happened. Something that turned this war into something far more dangerous. I received an anonymous letter in the mail. Inside, there was only one sentence. "Your son isn't working alone." The words burned into my mind. Who was helping him? Why? And what were they planning? I didn't have the answers yet, but I knew one thing. The next move was mine, and I would make it count. I sat in my kitchen that night with the anonymous letter in my trembling hands, staring at those 5 chilling words. "Your son isn't working alone." My heart pounded so hard it hurt. Daniel was already dangerous enough on his own, calculating, greedy, and reckless. But now, someone else was feeding his ambition, someone who knew how to push him to the edge. I thought of all the people he had been around lately. His new girlfriend with the sharp tongue, his slick-talking friend Kyle who always seemed to have shady business deals, and even his estranged cousin, Richard, who had once tried to borrow money from Charles and was denied. Any one of them could be the snake whispering in his ear. The first thing I did was call Gregory. "I got a letter," I said, my voice shaking. "It says Daniel isn't working alone." Gregory's voice dropped low. "Do not confront him yet. Whoever's behind this is smart enough to stay hidden. We need to catch them in the act. I'll have someone keep an eye on your son." True to his word, Gregory hired a private investigator, a quiet man named Frank who moved like a shadow. Within 2 days, Frank came back with photos. Daniel had been meeting someone at a diner late at night. When I looked at the grainy pictures, my stomach turned. It was Richard, Charles's own nephew. The same man who had been banned from our house years ago after trying to steal from us. The two of them were sitting in a corner booth, whispering, their heads close together like conspirators. "They're planning something," Frank said grimly. "And from what I overheard, they think they can trick you into signing another set of documents. They believe you're weak." Weak? They were about to learn just how strong I had become. That weekend, Daniel showed up again, this time pretending to be sweet. He brought flowers, something he hadn't done in years, and hugged me like he meant it. "Mom," he said softly, "I've been thinking. I don't want us to fight. I just want to take care of you. I found a wonderful senior community where you can relax while I handle everything else." I nearly laughed in his face. Did he think I didn't see through the act? But I kept my expression warm and said, "That's so thoughtful of you, Daniel. Why don't you bring the paperwork and we'll talk about it over dinner?" His eyes lit up. He thought he had me. The next evening, he arrived with Richard. They came in smiling, but I could see the greed dripping from their eyes. They placed a stack of papers on my table. "Just sign here, Aunt Margaret. Richard said, his voice slick. It's just to make the transition easier. You'll still have everything you need. I pretended to skim the papers, nodding occasionally, while my heart pounded in my chest. What they didn't know was that Gregory was listening in from the other room, recording everything. As they grew more insistent, I finally said, "You boys are so helpful. Let me just grab my reading glasses from the kitchen." I stepped out, leaving the papers on the table. That's when Gregory walked in with a camera, snapping photos of them as they tried to swap out the original papers with a different set. "Smile for the camera, gentlemen," Gregory said coolly. Daniel's face turned white and Richard stammered. What is this?" Gregory held up the recorder. "Evidence. Evidence that you're attempting fraud against a 70-year-old widow. I hope you're ready to face the consequences." Daniel's mask fell. His eyes darkened and he yelled, "You set me up?" I walked back into the room slowly, calm as ever. "No, Daniel. You set yourself up the moment you betrayed your own mother." They stormed out, cursing, but not before Daniel spat. "You'll regret this, Mom. You think you've won, but you haven't seen anything yet." The next morning, I received a call from the bank manager. "Mrs. Hill, someone attempted to hack into your account last night. Don't worry, we blocked it immediately. But whoever it was knew too much about your financials." My blood ran cold. It was Daniel and Richard, without a doubt. They weren't stopping, they were escalating. I knew I had to go on the offensive. Gregory advised, "It's time to make our move. We'll file for a restraining order, freeze any activity connected to them, and prepare to press charges. But we need to time this perfectly." The following days were tense. I rarely left the house, and when I did, I felt eyes on me. One evening, while reviewing the trust documents in my living room, I heard a noise outside. Checking the cameras, I saw Daniel and Richard trying to cut the wires. Before they could finish, the alarms blared, and the police arrived within minutes. They fled into the night, but I knew they'd be back. The investigator called me later that night with more shocking news. Daniel had taken out a large loan using fake collateral. Collateral he claimed was my house. The bank had flagged it, but the audacity of it left me breathless. He was drowning in debt and using me as a lifeline. I sat at my table that night, staring at the stack of evidence Gregory had compiled. Every lie, every attempt to steal, every threat, it was all there. I realized Daniel wasn't just greedy. He was desperate. And desperate men were dangerous. But so was a mother with nothing left to lose. The next morning, I signed a set of papers Gregory had prepared. "What's this?" I asked. Gregory smiled. "The final move. Once we file this, Daniel's access to anything tied to you or your assets will vanish completely. He'll be left with nothing but his own mess to clean up." As I signed, I felt the weight lifting off my shoulders. But little did I know, Daniel had one last trick up his sleeve, and it would put me in more danger than ever before. The morning after I signed Gregory's final set of papers, I felt a strange calm. For the first time in weeks, I believed I was ahead of Daniel. The trust was ironclad, the bank was on my side, and the restraining order was ready to be filed. But deep down, I knew the storm wasn't over. It was just gathering strength. That evening, as I prepared myself a quiet dinner, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. The voice on the other end was cold, male, and unfamiliar. "Mrs. Hill," it said, "tell your lawyer to back off, or you'll regret it." Before I could reply, the call ended. My hands trembled as I set the phone down. This wasn't just Daniel anymore. This was someone willing to threaten me directly. Gregory's investigator, Frank, confirmed my fears later that night. Daniel's loan shark is involved now. He owes them a lot of money, and they're using you as leverage. This isn't just about the house anymore. It's about survival for him. The pieces clicked into place. The anonymous letter, the threats, the late-night visits. Daniel had entangled himself with people who wouldn't hesitate to hurt me to get what they wanted. Fear crept into my bones, but I refused to let it control me. Instead, I fortified my house even further and handed all evidence to the police. They advised me to stay somewhere safe, but I shook my head. "No," I said. "This is my home. I'm not running. The next day, Daniel showed up, not with anger this time, but with a trembling voice. His eyes were bloodshot, his hands shaky. Mom, you have to help me. These people, they're dangerous. They'll kill me if I don't pay them back. My heart twisted. For a brief moment, I saw my little boy, the one who used to run to me when he scraped his knee. But the sympathy faded when I remembered the threats, the lies, the betrayal. Daniel, I said softly, you brought this on yourself. He dropped to his knees, begging. Please, Mom, just sign the house over to me. Just until I pay them off. I swear I'll give it back. I stared at him, tears welling in my eyes. You think signing my home away will save you? Those men won't stop at the house. They'll drain you dry, and then they'll come for me. His face hardened and he spat. If you're not going to help me, then don't blame me for what happens next. He stormed out, slamming the door so hard the glass rattled. That night, I barely slept, pacing the floors with Charles's letter clutched in my hand. I knew Daniel was at his breaking point, and desperate people do desperate things. I prayed for strength, but my prayers were interrupted by the sound of shattering glass. I froze. My heart pounded in my chest as I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. Through the darkness, I saw a shadow creeping inside my living room. The alarm screamed and the figure bolted, but not before I recognized the silhouette. It was Daniel. My own son had broken into my home. The police arrived, but Daniel was gone. They searched the area but found nothing. The officer shook his head. Ma'am, you need to consider staying somewhere else. This isn't safe. I refused again. This was my house, my fortress, and I would not abandon it. Not to Daniel, not to anyone. The next morning, the bank manager called me with urgent news. Mrs. Hill, your son attempted to transfer funds from an account that doesn't even belong to him. The attempt was flagged, and now the federal authorities are involved. My knees nearly buckled. This was no longer just a family dispute. This was a crime. Gregory met me later that day with a grim expression. Margaret, it's time to end this. I've filed all the necessary charges. There's enough evidence to have Daniel arrested for fraud, attempted theft, and breaking and entering. But are you sure you want to go through with this? He's still your son. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Yes. Because if I don't stop him now, he'll destroy both of us. That evening, as I sat in my living room staring at the fire, I heard another noise outside, this time louder, closer. When I checked the cameras, my heart stopped. Daniel wasn't alone. 2 men in dark hoodies stood with him, pointing toward my house. I called the police, but by the time they arrived, the men were gone. Only a message was left spray-painted on my garage door. This isn't over. The fear was suffocating, but it was also fueling something inside me, a fire I hadn't felt in years. Charles's words echoed in my mind. Keep your name strong. I was done being scared. It was time to flip the script entirely. The next morning, I made one final call to the bank. Activate the clause, I said. The manager hesitated. Are you sure, Mrs. Hill? Once we do this, there's no going back. I closed my eyes, my voice steady. Do it. What Daniel didn't know was that Charles had left behind a failsafe, one last financial move that would leave me untouchable and Daniel completely powerless. As the bank set things in motion, I felt my strength returning. But later that night, I received a chilling video message. It was Daniel, tied up in a dimly lit room, with a man's voice in the background saying, "Bring us what we want, or you'll never see him again." My hands trembled as I clutched the phone. My son was in danger, but saving him would mean risking everything. The choice I made next changed everything forever. The video of Daniel tied up in that dimly lit room haunted me long after the screen went black. I sat frozen in my chair, the phone slipping from my trembling hand. The voice in the video had been cold, ruthless, and clear. Bring us what we want, or you'll never see him again. Tears rolled down my cheeks, but not just from fear. Anger burned through them. My son had betrayed me, lied to me, and stolen from me, but he was still my child. The thought of him in the hands of dangerous men twisted my stomach into knots. I picked up the phone and called Gregory. He answered immediately, and I told him everything. There was a long pause on the line before he said, "Margaret, this is serious. These men are not just scammers. They're criminals. You cannot negotiate with them. Let me contact the authorities." But something inside me hesitated. If I call the police, Daniel might not live long enough for them to save him, I said. My voice cracked, but there was steel underneath it. "Gregory, I need to do this my way." He sighed heavily. "Margaret, whatever you do, don't hand over any assets. They'll kill him, and you anyway. Use the trust. Use the leverage you have. These men want money, but they also want control. Don't give them either." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept staring at the phone, waiting for another message. Hours later, it came. A text this time. "Tomorrow, 9 p.m. Old Mill outside town. Bring the documents. Come alone." I knew it was a trap. They weren't going to just release Daniel because I showed up. But I also knew I couldn't ignore it. My heart was torn in two, between my survival and my son's life. Charles's letter echoed in my mind. The power isn't in the papers. It's in the name on them. The next morning, I went to the bank and executed one final move that even Gregory hadn't anticipated. I transferred all assets into a protected account that could only be accessed with my biometric signature, my fingerprint, my face. The papers I carried after that were worthless copies. They looked real enough to fool anyone, but they had no legal power. If the criminals wanted documents, I'd give them documents, but not the ones that would ruin me. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I drove to the old mill. The building stood like a ghost against the night sky, its broken windows staring at me like hollow eyes. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly. I whispered a prayer and stepped out of the car, clutching the folder of fake documents. Inside, the air was damp and heavy with dust. My footsteps echoed on the creaking floorboards. Then, out of the shadows, two men emerged, their faces hidden under hoods. Behind them, tied to a chair, was Daniel. His face was bruised, his eyes wide with fear. "Do you have what we asked for?" one of the men growled. I lifted the folder slowly. "I have what you want, but you let my son go first." The man laughed, a sound so cold it chilled me to my bones. "That's not how this works, Grandma. Hand it over, or we'll make sure you leave here in pieces." My heart raced, but I kept my voice steady. "If you hurt him, you'll never get a cent. These papers mean nothing without me." The second man stepped closer, his knife glinting in the dim light. "Don't play games with us." At that moment, I made my move. "You think I came here alone?" I said. The men froze, glancing at each other. Right on cue, headlights flashed through the broken windows. Police sirens wailed in the distance. Gregory had followed me, bringing the authorities with him. The criminals panicked, grabbing Daniel as a shield. "We'll kill him," one shouted. I stepped forward, my voice rising like I hadn't heard it in years. "No, you won't. Because if you do, you'll never see a single penny. Let him go, and you might walk out of here alive." For a tense moment, no one moved. Then, as the sirens grew louder, the men shoved Daniel to the ground and bolted through the back. The police stormed in seconds later, chasing them into the night. Daniel lay coughing and shaking on the floor. I knelt beside him, tears falling onto his bruised hands. "Daniel, oh my God." He looked at me with shame in his eyes. "Mom, I'm sorry." But before I could respond, one of the criminals' voices echoed from outside. "This isn't over. Old woman, you'll regret crossing us." The officers escorted us out, but I knew this battle wasn't finished. Daniel was alive, yes, but the men who had taken him were still out there, and they weren't going to give up so easily. That night, as Daniel slept in the hospital under police watch, I sat by his side, clutching Charles's letter once again. I realized the next fight wouldn't just be against criminals. It would be against the darkness inside my own son. Because even after everything, I wasn't sure if he was truly sorry, or if his greed still burned underneath his tears. And then, just when I thought I could breathe, my phone buzzed with a new message from an unknown number. I opened it and froze. It was a photo of my house, taken that very night, with a caption that read, "Next time, we burn it down." I knew then the war was only escalating. I stared at the photo on my phone, my house glowing eerily under the moonlight in the image. The caption burned into my mind. "Next time, we burn it down." My breath caught, my pulse raced. They were watching me closer than I thought. Fear gripped me, but I couldn't let it take control. Not when everything I loved was at stake. I rushed to the hospital where Daniel was resting. His eyes fluttered open as I entered. For a moment, I saw my boy again, the son who used to run to me after school, asking for cookies. But that moment was short-lived. He turned his face away, ashamed. "Mom," he whispered, "you should have just given them what they wanted." I clenched my fists. "Daniel, they wouldn't have stopped. Even if I gave them everything, they'd have taken more, until there was nothing left of us." He didn't respond, but tears rolled down his cheeks. I sat beside him, holding his hand. "You got yourself into this, and now you're going to help me get us out. Do you hear me?" He nodded weakly, though I wasn't sure if it was out of guilt or fear. When Gregory arrived, I showed him the photo. His expression darkened. "Margaret, they've crossed a line. We're going to the FBI. These people are part of an organized ring. They'll be tracked and taken down, but we need bait, something to lure them out." I hesitated, then said, "Use me. Use the house. They want it? Let's give them the illusion they're getting it." Gregory frowned, but finally nodded. "You're braver than most, Margaret. If we do this, we do it smart." The plan was set. The police installed hidden cameras and sensors around my property. The trust documents remained secure, but I left a fake, original deed inside a safe that was easy enough to break into. Everything was staged to look real. The following night, I stayed in a hotel under police protection, watching the cameras from my laptop. At 2 a.m., movement appeared on the screen. 2 figures creeping toward my house, carrying gas cans. My breath hitched. They weren't just there to steal. They were ready to burn everything to the ground. The men broke in easily, heading straight for the safe. One of them pried it open, pulling out the fake papers with a triumphant laugh. "Got it," he said to the other. "Burn the place down." But before they could strike a match, the floodlights blazed on, blinding them. Sirens erupted from hidden speakers. Armed officers swarmed the property, pinning them to the ground in seconds. The men fought, screaming, but they were no match for the ambush. One of them yelled, "You don't know who you're messing with. This goes higher than you think." The police dragged them away, but his words sent a chill down my spine. Higher than I think. Who else was involved? The next morning, I visited Daniel at the hospital to tell him the news.
"They were caught," I said.
He looked relieved for a moment, but then his expression shifted to worry. "Mom, they weren't the only ones. There's someone else. Someone worse." I froze.
"Who?"
Daniel hesitated, then whispered, "The lone shark, his name is Victor Kane. He runs everything. If he finds out you tricked his men, he'll come for you himself." The name sent shivers down my spine. I had heard of Victor Kane, stories of a ruthless man who controlled people with fear and violence. He wasn't just a criminal, he was a predator. Later that day, I received a call from an unknown number. This time, I didn't hesitate to answer. The voice on the line was calm, almost polite. "Mrs. Hill," it said, "you've caused me quite a lot of trouble. I admire your strength, but you've made a mistake crossing me. You have one last chance. Bring me the real documents tomorrow night, or you'll watch everything you love turn to ashes." My heart pounded, but I kept my voice steady. "You'll never get what you want from me." He chuckled darkly. "We'll see about that." The line went dead. I stood there, clutching the phone, knowing this wasn't just a threat, it was a promise. Victor Kane was coming for me, and he wouldn't stop until he got what he wanted. Gregory and the FBI set up a plan, but I could feel the danger closing in. Daniel, pale and trembling, begged me, "Mom, don't face him. Please. He's not like the others. He'll kill you." I looked at my son, my heart breaking. "Daniel, I've faced death before. I buried your father. I've lived through pain you can't imagine. If Victor Kane thinks he can scare me, he's about to learn what a mother protecting her legacy can do. That night, as I prepared for what might be my final battle, I found another letter from Charles tucked in an old book. When fear comes, stand taller than it. They may have power, but you have something stronger, courage and the truth. I clutched the letter to my chest and whispered, I won't let you down. The next night, I walked into the trap Victor Kane had set for me, knowing only one of us would walk out victorious. What happened in that warehouse changed everything. It's the night the hunter became the hunted. The warehouse was silent except for the sound of my shoes tapping against the cold concrete floor. The air smelled of rust and gasoline, and every step echoed like a warning. My heart was pounding so loud I was sure they could hear it, but I walked tall, clutching the briefcase of worthless papers in my hand. This wasn't just a meeting. It was a standoff between a 70-year-old widow and a man who thought fear ruled the world. Victor Kane stood in the center of the warehouse, surrounded by his men. He was nothing like I expected. He wasn't loud or intimidating by sheer size. He was calm, almost elegant in his dark suit, but his eyes, they were the eyes of a predator. Cold, calculating, and merciless. Mrs. Hill, he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. You've caused me quite an inconvenience, but I respect a woman who fights for what's hers. Unfortunately for you, that ends tonight. I kept my voice steady. You think you scare me, Victor? You think you can threaten a mother who has already buried her husband and nearly lost her son? He chuckled. Bravery won't save you. Only those papers in your hand can. He extended his arm. Give them to me, and you and your boy walk away. I stepped closer, holding the briefcase tightly. You think you're powerful because people fear you. But you don't understand. Real power doesn't come from fear. It comes from being willing to lose everything and still stand. Victor's smile faded. He nodded to his men, who stepped forward. Just then, the sound of sirens wailed outside. His eyes narrowed. You brought company? Before I could speak, agents burst through every entrance, weapons raised. FBI, drop your weapons. Chaos erupted. Victor's men drew their guns, but they were outnumbered. Shots rang out, and I ducked behind a crate, clutching the briefcase to my chest. In the middle of the chaos, Victor grabbed me, pulling me to my feet. He held a gun to my head, snarling, Call them off or you die right here. My heart raced, but I met his eyes. Do it. Kill me. But if you do, you'll never get what you want. Those papers are worthless without me, and my lawyer already has the evidence to bury you if anything happens to me. His grip tightened, but I didn't flinch. For a moment, he hesitated. That moment was all the FBI needed. They swarmed him, pulling me away as they tackled him to the ground. The gun clattered to the floor. Victor Kane, the man who thought he owned fear, was dragged out in handcuffs, cursing my name. When the warehouse finally fell silent, I collapsed into Gregory's arms, trembling. It's over, I whispered. But he shook his head. Not yet, Margaret. Men like Victor have roots that run deep. Tonight was a victory, but the war isn't over. The FBI escorted me home under heavy protection. The house was intact, but it no longer felt the same. I looked at Daniel, who had been released from the hospital, and was waiting on the porch. He ran to me, tears streaming down his face.
Mom.
I thought you were dead. I held him tight, my own tears falling freely. I'm alive, Daniel. But you need to understand something. You almost destroyed both of us. He sobbed into my shoulder. I'm sorry, Mom. I swear I'll make this right. I'll change. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. But part of me wondered if his remorse was born from love or from fear of losing everything. Only time would tell. That night, as I sat alone by the fire, I opened Charles's letter one last time. His words reminded me of who I was, who I had always been. Strong, resilient, and unbreakable. The world had tried to take everything from me, but I was still standing. The next morning, Gregory handed me the final documents confirming everything was secure. My house, my accounts, the trust. No one could touch me now. But just as I exhaled in relief, my phone buzzed with a new message. My heart sank as I read the words. "You may have won this round, but your son still belongs to me." My hand shook as I realized Victor wasn't the only threat. His network was still out there, and they weren't done with us yet. The fight wasn't over. It was only changing form. I stared at the message on my phone until the letters blurred through my tears. "Your son still belongs to me." The words were like poison, seeping into my heart and twisting every ounce of relief I had felt after Victor's arrest. His network was still out there, shadowy and unseen, and they were reminding me they weren't finished. When I showed Gregory the message, his expression hardened. "They're trying to intimidate you. We have Victor in custody, and his men are scattered. But whoever sent this, they're one of the remnants, maybe his second in command. Margaret, you need to stay under protection until this is resolved." I shook my head. "I'm not hiding. If they think they can scare me back into a corner, they've underestimated me again." Daniel sat silently in the corner, his face pale. He hadn't spoken much since the warehouse. Finally, he lifted his head and said, "Mom, they're right. They're not done. I still owe them. Even with Victor gone, the debt remains." My heart ached. "Daniel, we'll fix this. But you have to tell me everything. No more lies." And for the first time, he did. He confessed everything. How the debt started with gambling, how he borrowed from the wrong people, how every bad choice led to another. His voice cracked as he said, "I didn't mean for any of this to touch you, Mom. I thought I could handle it, but I dragged you into my mess, and now you're the one paying the price." I reached across the table, taking his trembling hand. "You're my son, Daniel. I'll protect you, but you need to stand with me, not against me. Promise me you'll fight with me now." He nodded, tears spilling down his cheeks. Later that night, Gregory came with news. The FBI is setting up a sting. They want to use the message as bait to lure out whoever's pulling the strings. "Margaret, they'll try to contact you again. When they do, we'll be ready." As expected, another message came the next evening. This time, it wasn't a threat. It was a demand. "Bring the real documents to the abandoned pier at midnight.
Come alone.
If you call the cops, your son disappears forever." Attached was a photo of Daniel, taken earlier that day from outside our house. My blood ran cold. They were watching us even under protection. Gregory looked at me, his jaw tight. "This is a trap, but we'll use it against them. The FBI will be there, hidden. Margaret, you just have to play your part." Midnight came, and with it the storm. Rain pounded as I drove to the pier, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. The briefcase of fake papers sat beside me. When I stepped out, the cold wind whipped through my hair, but I walked tall. I wasn't just a mother anymore. I was a fighter. A figure stepped out from the shadows. He was younger than Victor, but his presence was just as terrifying. He wore a black coat, his eyes glinting with malice. "Mrs. Hill," he said smoothly, "you've been a real headache. But tonight, this ends." He gestured to the side, and two men dragged Daniel forward, his hands tied, his mouth gagged. My heart twisted, but I kept my face calm. "You have what we asked for?" the man asked, eyeing the briefcase. "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "Release my son, and it's yours." He smirked. "You're not in a position to negotiate." He nodded to his men. "Kill her after we get the papers." But before they could move, lights exploded across the pier. Agents shouted from all directions. "FBI, drop your weapons." Gunfire erupted, echoing across the water. I ducked behind a crate as chaos unfolded. Agents swarmed, tackling the men, disarming them. The leader grabbed Daniel and tried to flee, but was taken down before he could reach the edge of the pier. When the smoke cleared, Daniel was safe. The men were in custody, and the leader was dragged away screaming, "This isn't over. There are more of us." The FBI confirmed later that this man had been Victor's right hand, the one who kept the network running. His arrest dealt a final blow to their operation, but they warned me to stay vigilant. That night, back at home, Daniel sat beside me, his face streaked with tears. "Mom, I don't deserve you. You risked everything for me. I took his hand, my voice trembling but strong. You're my son, Daniel. You made mistakes, but you're still mine. Now it's time to make things right. He promised me he would change. For the first time, I believed he meant it. The next morning, Gregory handed me a final folder. Margaret, it's done. The network is dismantled, your assets are secure, and your name is untouchable. You've won. I thought it was over, but as I stood on my porch, watching the sunrise, a black car slowed as it passed my house. The window rolled down just enough for me to see a pair of eyes watching me. Then the car sped away. The war might have been won, but the shadows were still there, lurking. And I knew they'd be back if I wasn't careful. In that moment, I made a decision. I wasn't going to wait for the next attack. I was going to end this once and for all. The black car haunted my thoughts long after it disappeared from sight. Its brief appearance was a warning, a reminder that even though the FBI had captured Victor's men, there were still pieces of his network lurking in the shadows. They weren't finished with me, and I wasn't about to sit and wait for them to strike first.
For days, I stayed vigilant.
Cameras surrounded my property, and officers patrolled nearby, but unease still clung to me. I knew I had to take control. The FBI wanted me to keep a low profile, but my instincts told me this war would only end if I made the final move. Charles's words from his letter echoed in my mind, "Stand taller than fear." One evening, Gregory came by with new intel. "Margaret," he said gravely, "we've intercepted chatter. The remnants of Victor's network are planning something big. They think you're vulnerable and they're regrouping. The FBI is ready to raid their last hideout, but we need bait." I looked him dead in the eye. "Use me. This ends now." The plan was dangerous, but it was the only way. The FBI would stage a transfer, documents, and cash they believed were real, and me as the delivery. The goal was to draw out every last member hiding in the network. It was risky, but I had survived too much to back down. The following night, under the cover of darkness, I walked into the old shipyard where the meeting was arranged. The place reeked of salt and oil, the sound of waves crashing against the docks blending with the distant hum of engines. The briefcase in my hand felt heavier than ever, not because of what was inside, but because of what was at stake. From the shadows, half a dozen men appeared, armed and ready. One stepped forward, a scar running across his cheek. "Mrs. Hill," he sneered, "you're either brave or stupid for coming here." I straightened my shoulders. "I came to finish this." He reached for the briefcase, but I pulled it back. "Release everyone involved with you. Leave me and my son alone, and maybe you'll get what you came for." The men laughed. "You think you're in control here?" the leader said. He raised his gun, pointing it at me. At that moment, I gave the signal, a small tap on the metal case. Within seconds, the entire shipyard erupted in flashing lights. FBI agents descended from every angle, surrounding the men. Gunfire cracked through the night. The leader grabbed me, dragging me toward a boat as a shield, but I didn't panic. "You can kill me," I hissed, "but you'll never escape. You're surrounded." He hesitated, glancing at the agents closing in. In that instant, I stomped on his foot and slammed the briefcase into his stomach, breaking free just as the FBI swarmed. They tackled him to the ground, weapons clattering into the water. The rest of his men surrendered or were taken down in seconds. When the dust settled, the leader was hauled away screaming, "This isn't over. Old woman, you'll never be safe." But this time I knew he was wrong. The FBI confirmed the operation had dismantled every last branch of the network. Victor Kane's empire was gone, and his men were either dead or in custody. Back home, the weight I had carried for so long finally lifted. Daniel hugged me tighter than he ever had before. "Mom," he whispered, "you saved me. You saved us." I looked into his eyes, seeing not the boy who betrayed me, but the man who had survived alongside me. "No, Daniel. We saved each other. Now we build something better." Over the following weeks, he worked to make amends, attending therapy and paying off what debts he could under the FBI's guidance. It wasn't an easy road, but I saw hope in him again. And as for me, I took control of my life like never before. The house, the accounts, the trust, everything was secured tighter than Fort Knox. My name, as Charles said, remained strong. On my porch one quiet evening, I read his final letter one more time. It felt like he was there beside me, smiling, proud of the woman I had become. I whispered to the wind, "We won, Charles. We won." When the sun set, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat back, breathing in the peace I had fought so hard to earn. To those who watched my story unfold, here's what I learned. Never underestimate the quiet strength of a mother. Never let fear make you small. And never forget that even in the darkest nights, there's a way to stand tall. My war was over. My name was untouchable. My legacy was secure. But as I watched the last of the evening light fade, a single thought crossed my mind. If they ever come back, they'll find me ready. Because I am Margaret Hill, and I am unbreakable. Thank you for staying with me through this journey. If my story moved you, if it showed you that strength has no age, then like, comment, and subscribe. Because every story matters, especially yours.